Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so glad that you're here to learn a little bit more about the Regeneron Science Talent Search, which is the nation's oldest and most prestigious science research competition for high school seniors. My name is Allie Stiefel. I'm the director of the Regeneron Science Talent Search competition.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Got a little feedback loop there. But anyways, I'm Allie. I run the Science Talent Search, and I have for many years, and I am delighted to be joined by my colleague, Elaine Edwards, who will introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elaine Edwards, and I am the Senior Specialist for the Science Talent Search. We have an excellent webinar for you tonight, one we've not really done before, with tons of advice from our past educators. So very excited to have you all with us today.
That's right. So tonight's webinar is a bit unique for us, and we are so excited, like Elaine said, to feature the advice of some of our most experienced educators who've supported probably thousands of students through the STS application process. So the advice we'll share tonight is both for students and at the end for educators, so tailored to both audiences. So stay tuned for both sections, especially if you're an educator, you'll want to stay till the very end. If you have questions all throughout the session, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll be sure to address them at the very end of the session. So if we don't get to your question midway through, never fear, we will be sure to get to it. We'll also start with a very brief program overview, just in case this is your very first time learning about STS. But if that's the case, we also strongly recommend that you visit our website at societyforscience.org/Regeneron-STS, or just Google it and you'll find it. The site has so many amazing resources that kind of give you the 101 of the program, including a page where you'll find all kinds of tips of how to apply, and about 15 other webinars that we have filmed in the last year that kind of give you that STS overview, eligibility rules, anything that you might be looking for, you'll probably find there. So be sure to check that out. So with that, we will give you that brief overview.
All right. So in brief, the Regeneron Science Talent Search is the nation's oldest science research competition for high school seniors. To apply, students submit an online application at our website, sciencetalentsearch.smapply.org. We'll also make sure that is in the description of the video. This application consists of an original research paper of 20 pages or less, plus other tasks, things like recommendations from teachers and mentors, essays, questions about students in their research, and more. And what we're really looking for are future leaders in STEM among each year's graduating class. Our review process is holistic, meaning that while we are a research competition and the project a student competes with is very important, it is not the only factor in selection. All those other things we just mentioned in the application matter as well. And each year, around 2,000 students apply by our deadline in November. This year's deadline is November 7th, 2024 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. 300 students are selected from that 2,000 as scholars, and they win a $2,000 cash prize, and so do their schools. So very cool for students and educators. And then from that group, 40 are chosen as finalists and given the opportunity to compete in Washington, D.C. for additional awards up to our $250,000 grand prize. So as Allie noted, we have many other webinars plus plenty of resources on our website, and we'll get into those a little bit later that go into further detail about all of this, all aspects of the program. But we do hope that if you're new here, that gives you just a bit more context.
Very good. Thank you, Elaine. So tonight's big feature, advice from experienced educators. I'll start just by saying that we strongly believe here at the Society that performing original research as a high school student is one of the very best experiences that you can have as a young person that's going to prepare you for life later. So we want to commend every single student who has done an original research project at any point in middle school or especially in high school. You're gaining a lot of real life work experience, project management experience, time management. All of these are really important skills in addition to the science that you're learning. So we hope that you're getting a lot out of it from your own self-initiative. We know that you are. So it's about so much more than entering a competition. But you might as well, that's why you're here, enter a competition like STS because there are awards to be won, and it's great to be recognized for your work. So today we are incredibly honored to present the advice of some of our most experienced and successful educators in our program. The individuals who are sharing their advice tonight on screen have all produced, I think in most cases, multiple top 300 and top 40 finalists in the course of their careers. So they have a lot of experience guiding students through the research process and the application process. So you'll hear advice about both of these things. We wanted to have this webinar because we know that students who might be interested in a program like STS have varying levels of support. Maybe you go to a high school that has a research class and they show you how to do a project kind of start to finish, and it's a real kind of group initiative where people cheer each other on. Well, heck, that's amazing to have that kind of support and camaraderie, but not everybody has that, and not everybody has a great teacher who specifically helps them with research, right? And so these incredible teachers are so generously sharing their advice that has made their students so successful with all of you. And I want to be clear that we reached out to all teachers of record of scholars and finalists from the last couple of years just to keep the playing field fair. Sorry, we're not trying to play favorites here is the point. So we're just really grateful that they were willing to share forward their advice for the benefit of the next generation of leaders in STEM, because that's really what this is all about. So with that, first we're going to share their advice for students. So advice for any students who are on the line who are interested in applying this year. This is for you. Let's check it out.
So what makes an application a good application? One, know the application. That means start early. That gives you time to review, reflect, and improve.
With the application opening in June, you have almost a third of the year to do it. The hardest thing, though, is getting started.
Research isn't easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And likewise, showcasing research isn't always easy.
Highlight your success. Highlight the positives of your research project. However, one thing that I strongly recommend is that you acknowledge the limitations of your project. Remember who your audience is. Remember who's reading your project. Scientists. Scientists not only know all about failure, but they also embrace failure.
This is research. It's a process. You don't have to know everything, and that's okay.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Acknowledge everyone that has helped you. Scientists get help from other colleagues. That's how science works.
And most importantly, believe in yourself and challenge yourself. Because the worst thing that can happen is that things don't work out. Learn from your experiences and create your own unique story.
And have fun. Einstein once said that fun and play is research.
I would encourage my students to apply with no expectations, but instead to come out of it with an honest reflection that they gave it their absolute best to showcase all the amazing work they've done. Because regardless, the application is a life-changing experience in and of itself.
So stick to it, stick to the scientific process, and you never know, you might be on the top 300 come January. Take care.
Awesome. So that was such incredible advice from this really well-established group. We know that they know their stuff, and so we're not going to repeat too much of it, but we would like to share a few things of our own too. And again, just a reminder that we've recorded so many other webinars full of our application advice, so this might be a little repetitive, but that's because it's just very good advice. And so here are our favorite tips for students. First is work in small chunks. We know that the application is long, and breaking it down can make it more approachable and help you stay motivated. We also recommend saving your work. Internet outages happen, funky system things can happen. It is always a good idea to keep your answers somewhere you can access them just in case. Believe in yourself. This one, we know it sounds a little corny, but it is honestly so true. Every year, finalists tell us that they weren't sure about entering, and almost all of them say that they thought they had no chance of being named a finalist. So definitely do not count yourself out before you start. We also always recommend that you request recommendations early. Our deadline is the same for both recommendations and the application, no exceptions. And this year that is extra important because there's an election right before our deadline. And so you don't want to run into delays because your teacher isn't at school and can't access the system, for example. Also important to know that our recommendations are not form letters. Your teachers and mentors are going to need time to answer our very specific questions. So it's not just as easy as uploading a PDF. So really spare yourself the heartbreak and give your recommenders plenty of time to submit those recs. Just start. It is very easy to sometimes get in your head about a question. And what this means is that we find doing things like word association or just recording yourself answering questions out loud can really help jumpstart a response. You can always go back and edit, but this is a great way to just start getting something on the page. Make a thesis. This is extremely important and something that we have shared before, but it's because we really believe that it can help clarify your application before you get started. So what we mean by this is thinking about who you are and what are the top 3 things you care about. It's important to remember that STS is looking for future leaders in science, and you can show leadership in many different ways and in many different areas of your life. So list the top 3 ways that you lead in your life, at school, in your community, and use these to really help inform your answers. We also like to tell folks that winning isn't everything. And so please really do understand that simply by doing a project and completing our intensive application process, these are already huge feats in and of themselves. And there are huge benefits just to applying. We send a package full of swag to entrants, so you do get a prize just for entering, but other things too. You also get to practice your scientific writing by our application. You get to practice things like time management, work on essays that you can use for college. We really recommend that you are just proud of yourself for investing in your future, and remember that winning is just a bonus. It can help to take some of the pressure off. And on that note, don't take it too seriously. You can really think of this as a creative exercise and a learning opportunity. We want you to be yourselves in your application, not the most impressive version of you. So it's really important to have fun with it. And finally, be honest. Give credit where credit is due. This is important because it is both a rule for us. We require students to attribute any outside support received and to disclose potential conflicts of interest, paid research programs, and so on. And students who don't do so can fail to qualify. But it is also just good practice. Science doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's important to be able to talk about your own achievements while also thanking and crediting those who've helped you along the way. So with those tips, we think you'll be in a very good place to start your STS application.
That's exactly right. And that's where your educators come in. Maybe you're tuning in tonight because you are new as an educator a new educator and or just new to the research process. You want to learn more about it. You want to learn from other programs. It's good to see what other people are doing. We know you have a shared goal, which is just to support your students through this. Admittedly, it's a long application. It's a tough application. Students sometimes need coaching and encouragement in addition just to getting started with doing a research project to begin with. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. We are excited to share the advice of people who have a lot of experience with our application about how they approach these things. And we know with the right support, it's very doable for students. I do want to stress on the piece that Elaine mentioned at the end of student advice, which is the be honest advice that we give to students. We can't stress this enough. And this is where educators who are in the role of encouraging students to apply or do any type of science at all, instilling the importance of integrity when it comes to science and also life is so crucial at this age. And we know it's important to all of you as well. You want your students to do the right thing and make the right decisions. It's really important here as well. We don't want to be fudging numbers, lying about our results, fabricating data, making fake images using AI. None of that is acceptable. We also don't want to be doing things like not crediting people who have supported us, whether it's with giving essay advice, that kind of thing. So the more that you can help them be honest and help themselves, the better off everyone will be. So I wanted to preface some of that here. But with that, we have some superstars here with their advice. So let's take it away.
My first tip for teachers is to be sure to plan the journey. The Science Talent Search application does change year to year, but the essential core stays the same. Students have to showcase what they've done, who they are, and how the research experience has shaped them, and get recommendations.
Given that students are working on their Regeneron STS application at the same time they're applying to colleges, this is a high stress time for them.
Keep your eye on those deadlines because the deadline comes up pretty quickly. And so if you can set intermediary deadlines before the final submission, I think you'll be able to take your mind off the worry of whether or not you can submit on time.
I give students a suggested timeline to follow, in which all the application tasks are broken down week by week. I even break down when their final paper is due. So their introduction is due 1 week, their methods the next week, and so forth, ending with their final paper due November 1st, so there's time for edits and revisions.
Get the ball rolling by implementing your plan in the spring. And then once the application does open, get them doing the little things that gets that progress bar moving in the application so that they feel a bit of confidence to get it done.
You'll be able to focus more on the science and on the questions because we know the questions are much more interesting than the answers.
Something else I think that's really important is for students to choose a topic that they're passionate about. I once had a student who was doing a neuroscience project and he wasn't thrilled with the project. I questioned him and said, "Why aren't you doing a computer science project? You love computers." And he said, "Miss Frank, that's a hobby of mine. I feel like it would be cheating." And I looked and said, "Oh my, of course you should be following your passion. If you love computers, follow your passion." And that's exactly what he did. And he had an incredible research experience. So always encourage your students to follow their passion.
Allow them to understand as early as possible that they will not be asked to read textbooks and take exams. They will be given the opportunity to create new science. They soon realize that research is their work and they take ownership.
Get in the trenches with the students. Every September, the students come into my classroom after school, and I am with them as they're doing their data analysis. I'm with them when they're writing their paper. I'm with them as they're posing interesting questions and supporting them. I think it's really important to go through this process together.
My favorite teachers were always the ones who never seemed to have somewhere better to go, something better to do when they were with me, with the other students, didn't seem to have their eyes on the horizon, but were focused on us and focused on me.
You also have to remember that all teaching and education is about solving problems. So if teachers can teach their students on how to ask the right question and then chase that in search of an answer, that'll be the most rewarding and meaningful experience for teachers.
Don't be afraid to show your growth to your students. Perhaps the most important thing that you can show the kids is how to figure it out, how to get there.
I invite you to not be afraid to step outside of your content area and to be a novice. Make sure that you're using that curiosity and showing the students that the best way to understand something is to go back to the primary literature and read.
Research is hard. Competition is hard. Science Talent Search is hard. When I started my research teaching, I started with high expectations, thinking I knew everything and I would have my students win everything, only to fall hard and flat on my face.
Please understand that any creative, enthusiastic science teacher can establish and maintain a science research program. Begin by identifying a small group of enthusiastic students and allow them to identify their own personal interests. Encourage them to learn more about each one. Continually remind them that this is their work. Let them move at their own pace and change directions at any time. Before long, you will see academic enthusiasm like you've never seen before. Ultimately, you will watch them deliver their paper and you will experience the feeling that keeps all of us motivated.
You have gifts that you may not recognize or may not value as much as your students do. Cheerleader, grammarian, math whiz, lab tech, networker. All of these skills will help the students now, and they will be invaluable to your kids when they internalize them for college and beyond.
At first glance, the Regeneron application is overwhelming and daunting. And I remind them that their research proposal also looked overwhelming and daunting at first glance. But they persevered, they finished their project, it can be done.
This process of STS will make the students more resilient, more creative problem solvers, creative thinkers, well-rounded, and more prepared for college.
When students hit submit, my students and I throw them a celebration. Sparkling apple juice, sweet treats, words of encouragement. I reiterate that regardless of the outcome, they have accomplished a great feat, and they've learned how to take something very complex, very overwhelming, and break it into bite-sized pieces for them to complete it. This will translate into how they approach college, when they start grant writing, and so forth.
So good luck, and I hope you enjoy the process.
Good luck with your program.
Good luck, everyone.
I wish you and your students the best of luck.
All right, incredible advice from really incredible people. Thank you all again. We'll give them a special shout out here in a minute. Elaine and I wanted to piggyback on a lot of the things that were said here and provide some additional tips to educators that we observe kind of within this group and the broader community as well. It's an important role that you have, and we talk about how it's daunting for the students. It can be daunting for the teachers as well, right? There's a lot to be done. So I do want to comment on just program structure first and foremost, just to reassure you that wherever you are at, you can be successful. Some of the teachers in the video, many of them have a research class at their school, which is incredible. That's not true for everyone, and it's not common everywhere either. Sometimes that's what you're building up to, but we see a lot of success from students who are doing research after school, doing research outside of school, but getting support from an educator more in a one-on-one kind of facilitation process. So please note, whatever your structure looks like, you have room to be successful. The other big question that we get at the society, and I know a lot of these teachers kind of touched on this as well, is the concept of mentorship. How can I find a mentor? And we're often asked, can you find a mentor for me or recommend a mentor? One, we do not do that just because it's a conflict of interest. However, there is an important role that a teacher can play if you choose to play this role for your students, again, depending on maybe what your program structure looks like. But we believe that teachers can be a really great connector or networker for their students in this capacity. Sometimes it just takes one connection to build more connections. So connecting with one scientist at the local university or the waste management company, or be creative about where these scientists might work. And then they might also fall in love with this process and connect you to others. So sometimes it's about connecting students directly. Sometimes it's about helping them write a template where they can reach out to mentors, helping them set maybe a contract with expectations for what is this mentor-mentee relationship going to look like. Maybe you challenge them to send a few cold emails every week until they hook a fish, right? You can help be an advocate, just again, depending on your program structure, but just to plant that seed that sometimes we hear that educators are helping in that capacity. Another great idea I heard from Nicole and many others is celebrating the small wins. We hear this a lot. We love to receive, we get them every year, photos from classrooms across America of teachers who are celebrating their students when they submit that application. They hit that submit button, the whole classroom goes wild, they cheer, and they celebrate each other's wins. Be that person, right? Like, you're a cheerleader for your students. You can help in the small way, celebrate the small wins, the full application submission. But that's another great thing that teachers we hear do to encourage their students. Another thing is to highlight the lessons that they're learning. Our application is designed to teach skills as much as it is to collect the information about the student. So we're trying to, alongside you, help provide formats for research papers, like what do we need? We're trying to draft our questions in a way to really give students the answers we need, right? So there's a lot of coaching kind of within the questions themselves, requiring students to credit their images in their paper. These are all things along the way that are designed to help students kind of communicate their story and give us the right information. The other thing is just be aware of the resources that are available. So if you're curious to learn more about, how do I get started doing research a little bit more one-on-one? We have a page on our website called Research at Home, which was initially developed during the pandemic, but still has a lot of great advice in terms of like, how do you do a research project if you're really just getting started and there are no other resources around you. And also a lot of links to some of our rules, getting familiar with our programs and other places that we recommend that you go for this kind of support. So do check that out. We have lots of other webinars, a lot of other resources on our website. So we recommend checking all of those things out as well. Want to give a huge, massive shout out to these amazing people who have joined us virtually today to share their advice with you, taking time out of their summer on summer break. So massive shout out to everyone here who is willing to share globally the advice that they give their students. So thank you to all of you. We are so appreciative, and we know that thousands of young people across the country are as well.
Awesome. So in addition to all of the great advice and resources that we've heard today, we did also mention earlier that just knowing resources in general is a great tip for both students and teachers. And here are a few of our favorites for the application. So our application website, again, that's sciencetalentssearch.smapply.org. It has FAQ pages for both applicants and recommenders, and those have plenty of answers to questions that we receive pretty often, and we update it throughout the program cycle just to make sure everything is up to date. These include general questions about the program or the application, but they also include things like troubleshooting tips. So if you're ever running into an issue, definitely recommend visiting those pages. We do also have a resource page, and that's where you can find helpful links to guides that we've created, past webinars, plenty of information there for anyone filling out an application. And then if you still have questions after reading all of that information, reading all of the additional pages on our Science Talent Search website as well, you can always email us at our help account, and that is sts@societyforscience.org. If you provide as much info as you can, especially in the case of system errors, include screenshots, that's very helpful to us. We're always going to be there to help you. We want you to succeed as much as you do. Allie, if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so we are going to take some questions here in a minute. So please do feel free to start leaving those in the chat. And while you do, just a couple of reminders. So one is that we hope you will join us for our next webinar. That is on Wednesday, September 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And it is a very exciting session. That is what makes a Regeneron STS finalist. And we are going to be talking about all the ways that you can take your application to the next level. So that is definitely not one to miss, and we will hope to see you there. We also will hope to see many of you open your application soon. So with the school year picking up, it is a great time to get started if you haven't already. Please do remember that that deadline to have all your materials submitted, including recommendations, is November 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern. So there is plenty of time to start, but it is always a good idea to save yourself the stress and start early if you can. All right, so I think we are ready to start taking some questions. Only see a few in the chat, but I know we got some in our webinar question form as well. Allie, I will read this one out. Oh, this is a good question. Going back to what you said about the template, do we have a resource report template that applicants can use as a sort of backbone while they're getting started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we actually don't provide a template. What we do provide are our requirements. So in on our website or in our rules book, which you can find both on the application website, we link it in a lot of emails that we send. If you were to Google the rules book, you would find it. One of the appendices is the research report requirements. And so that outlines what we require in the 20-page paper, down to like the font size that we want you to use, what sections should be included, some of these things. However, we are intentionally flexible about specific format because we know that disciplines are very different. And so we don't want to try to force, round peg in a square hole kind of situation. So please go with whatever is normal for your discipline. That would be our main advice.
And how about essays? Do we have essays available to use as a reference?
No, we do not share application content from past winners or entrants. The reason for that is we don't like copycats. We have seen in other programs that we run that when we share samples, then lo and behold, all of the essays that we get are pretty similar. We want to hear your unique voice. So for that reason, we do not share essays. However, this is not an English writing competition. So I would keep that in mind, that as much as that pains Elaine to hear me say, it isn't. And so, we do see students be very successful in this program, with short sentences with short answers to essays. When there's a minimum word count, you need to meet the word count. By all means, like, don't try just to max out every word count just for fun, or to try to impress us. Sometimes shorter is better. And that means, honestly, you're a strong communicator if you can get what you need to say out in a shorter number of words. So yeah, that would be our advice.
Awesome. All right, I will take this next one. How do I know if I'm eligible to apply? Great and timely question. Our first webinar of the season was actually about this. So if you visit our YouTube page where you are right now, you should be able to see that prior webinar full of great tips about how to know if you're eligible. I'll summarize really quickly. One is to visit the rules book on our website, and I will drop that link in just a second here in the chat as well. That is a huge document. We know it's large, but it is full of important information. So we have some general eligibility requirements. I'll run through those real fast. One is that this is a competition for high school seniors, so students in their last year of secondary school. It is also a competition for students who are living in and attending school in the US or US citizens living abroad. So it is not open to international students. It is an independent research competition. So we don't accept team projects as the main project that you submit for your application. You are, of course, welcome and encouraged within the application to talk about prior research, both team and independent. So those are just a few of the basic eligibility requirements, but we do also have much more robust rules about your research eligibility requirements. So this is especially true if you've worked with humans, vertebrate animals, potentially hazardous biological agents. Those are all things where if you worked with them as part of your research, you're going to want to pay special attention to those sections of our rules book. And then our application as well in task 3 has, it's a rules wizard. And so you will fill it out based on what you did for your project. And it will actually tell you the paperwork that we need, the approvals you should have gotten. So all of those, just very briefly, are some good ways to check that you're eligible. And again, if you have specific questions, you can email us at sts@societyforscience.org. All right, next question. Allie, can we report research that's gone through the first decision for journals or conferences, but isn't online yet? So pre-published.
Yes, for the purposes of the Science Talent Search, you can submit published research, unpublished research, and then anything in between that's in progress of getting approved. You should tell us the status of your research at the point that you apply, for a couple of reasons. One, like, that's awesome, right? Like, you're going through the process. That's such a learning experience. What an honor. What does it say about your research? That's fantastic. So congratulations. I will say it's about 50-50. About 50% of entrants have published research before and 50 have not. And that's about the same to scholars and finalists too. So don't feel like you have to fall in one category or the other. But it's also important to let us know because we do run plagiarism checks on every entry. We have for well over a decade. And sometimes you'll match to your own research if it appears anywhere online, like on a preprint site. And we just want to then be able to verify, like, oh, it matched because this is their paper. It's just it's already available online. So you can't always predict like when it might come through certain stages. And so it's just good to keep us let us know when you submit that application what the status is. And there's a place to do so in task 4 of the application.
Awesome. All right, I will take the next one. Does the research we submit have to be complete or have favorable results? Or can we submit a project that's still ongoing? Great question. We often say that a project, in order to be eligible for STS, has to be a completed independent scientific investigation with results to report. You are obviously welcome to continue working on that, but you need to have data to analyze in order for your research to be considered eligible. And in terms of the question of if it's favorable, I'm assuming you mean like we hear folks asking all the time, like, oh, my research isn't super groundbreaking. Is it still something that I should submit to STS? And we absolutely say yes. That is how science advances, is those little things along the way. And again, remember that our competition is not just about the research project. It is about your aptitude as a scientist. It is about your leadership skills, all the many different things that are part of our application. So definitely always, if you have a project that you're proud of, even if you don't think that it's going to change the world yet, we absolutely still want to see it in our entrant pool. All right, Allie, when do we start reviewing the projects?
Day after the deadline. It's a very tight process, right? If you consider that we're evaluating applications that are essentially longer than your college applications and announcing some of the winners and scholars and finalists as early as early January. So this is one of the reasons our deadline is notoriously strict. We absolutely cannot accept late entries for any reason, and we will not. So this is one. So because of that, we offer a couple of things. One, sorry to tell you now, but we'll be spamming you quite a bit towards that deadline, just to encourage you to get over the hump of getting things in as soon as you can. We also encourage you to submit early. You can submit your application at any point that you have completed all of the tasks. So you might have drafts that you still plan on editing, but you've done enough where it lets you hit submit, do it. Because you can keep editing. You just save the section that you edited. You don't have to resubmit. But that way you know that your entry is secured. Like a week ahead of time, I would be hitting submit, even if I'm adding small tweaks here and there until 7:59 on November 7th. The other thing we offer is, or that we do that is somewhat unique, we have a technical support deadline. The technical support deadline is 24 hours before the real deadline. So on November 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, that's your last chance to submit any technical questions to us. The website crashed, you lost data, you're having issue with the question, it's not accepting the word count's funky, whatever it is, you need to report it by that technical support deadline or we will not guarantee a resolution. There are a couple of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is to really encourage you to submit ahead of that so that you know if there are any issues coming into that deadline. So we evaluate starting the very next day. About over 200 PhD scientists across the nation are reading your applications. We assign at least 3 scientists initially to each entry. Usually applications end up being read by more than that. Usually it's between 4 and 7 because they do pass the papers around asking for specific opinions about things within your paper. So like you did a medical project and you weren't sure which category to enter, right? Like in my computer science and my medicine and health, you can choose. But then say the medical professionals who are reading your entry will say, I like it for what I understand of it, but I want the opinion of someone who knows machine learning better than I do. So then we'll pass it forward. And so rest assured, our judging is different from like ISEF in that way, that we're getting multiple experts that are needed to read your paper. And so again, that's one reason why it's so tight, is because we try to get as much expertise as we can on each entry.
And I see a follow-up on that asking if earlier submissions are reviewed first or receive priority.
They're not. Everything is turned over at once.
Awesome. All right, I will take this next one. What fraction gets selected? It is hard to convince kids to participate while applying to college. First, yes, we know, we absolutely share that, and I will touch on it in just a second. But first, to the question about the fractions. As Ali alluded to, I was an English major, so math is not my strong suit, but I think it's about 15%. So if you figure about 2,000 students apply each year, 300 are selected as scholars. And so again, that's a $2,000 cash prize for a student, and also $2,000 that goes to their school. And for that school prize, that's per scholar. So if a school has 3 scholars, you do the math. So again, 15% are selected as scholars, and then you get the 40 finalists. I think that's like 2%. And so when you think about it, it is actually, at least the scholar level, it is not as selective as, for instance, many colleges. And so it is definitely still worth it to apply. And we would also say that we have designed our application to coincide with college applications. So for instance, a couple of our essay questions are from the Common App. So we understand that the burden for high school students is immense, especially high school seniors. And that's one of the ways that we have tried to make that as low burden as possible, as low lift, that they're welcome to reuse those essays for our application. And as we said many times throughout this presentation, we do also strongly believe that completing our application mirrors completing a college application. And so it's something that can be done as part of that process. But definitely share your feelings that it is tough out there. And so we do recommend all of the things that have been said today: setting deadlines, planning ahead, making it part of the process so it is not as daunting.
That's right. And just to add 2 things to Elaine's answer here, which is everything she said is absolutely true. The other things I would add, one, this is we are well aware of this timing issue. We've done exploratory studies and surveys over the years with our recommender audience, like counselors, teachers who support students in this process, about how would we change the timeline if we did. The reason we've not is because we find that the value of sending our top 300 and top 40 lists to college admissions offices is strong. And so we want to be able to deliver those results to help students, with their future. So there are a couple ways that we do that. We have relationships with a lot of schools. We send the scholars, the top 300 students, receive a certificate that we ask them to pass along to their colleges. We also email up to 15 colleges on their behalf that they can list of where they've applied and where they would like us to reach out to let them know that they've made it to that next level. So, and same goes with the top 40 and top 10. We're communicating those results to offices as well. So that's the benefit. It's a huge benefit. And so we don't want students to lose out on that. So to make up for the fact that it's tough timing, we acknowledge that. This is why the application opens on June 1st every year. There was one year when we had to transition systems where we did it in August. It didn't really impact our numbers. However, we really want to make sure students have time to do this. So we open it in June. It is due in November. That's a lot of months to get it done. And I know it's summer, but you can get a lot done in an hour on this sucker. So I would recommend doing that. The first email that entrants get after they open an application tells you how you can get an enormous amount of things done in 1 hour. Like how we would, if it were me, how would I approach this application that we designed to get it done like as quickly as you can. So do check that out if you've already registered. To point out those things. And then, yeah, so we're with you. Those are the things that we do, and those are the reasons why.
Awesome. All right, a couple more here that I think we still have time for. Ali, approximately how much weight do the research report, recommendations, essays carry compared to each other?
It's a holistic review process. What that means for us, our rubric for the scholar level, there's not one that outweighs the other, right? It all matters to some extent. So for that, we say, put your best self forward. Whether, let us, and that's where having the thesis that we talked about comes in handy. Like, who am I? That's a deep question. No matter how old you are, it's especially deep when you're 17. But it's a really good start to making sure that how you want to be perceived, that you have those ideas on paper, and then you can cross-reference, like, have I made this clear in my application? You know, does this kind of concept appear in at least one question so they know who I am? So that's the advice that I would give there. One really isn't weighted more. To the question that asked, like, does my project have to have been successful to do well? No. In fact, I would say, you know, one of the critiques or common questions we get whenever we release our top 300 list every year without fail, we will get a question from a concerned parent, teacher, student, whom you name it, saying, you know, my Billy here was a first place winner at STS. How could he not be a top 300 scholar? There are a lot of reasons for that. It's a whole different group applying. This is not, there aren't quotas regionally, right? So anyone can apply from anywhere in the country, from any high school, as many as would like to apply. So it's a different competition. Students can submit research from any year of high school. So, you know, their junior year project where they wanted ISAF may not have been as strong as someone else's. But also, this is where it comes down to, it's not just about the research. So yeah, Johnny might have had a great ISEF project. And maybe a student who was named a top 40, maybe their project technically is not as strong, but there will be other reasons why that student made it. Maybe it was their volunteerism, leadership, other research they have also done, you name it. But that's where it comes down to, we are just looking for something different.
Great. All right, so a few more. I will take this next one, just confirming that if they submit, they can still go in and update essays. Yes, so this is one of the features of our system that students can work on it over time. They can save the responses, come back and edit later. We always recommend that students submit as soon as they're able to. How they do that is they have to complete all of the required tasks in the system, sign our ethics statement, and it will give them an option to submit. However, once they have submitted that application, they can still go back even on those completed tasks and edit them. And there are instructions on how to do that, again, on that application FAQ page. So check those out. One thing I would flag is that they can submit up until the deadline, and they can continue to make those edits up until the deadline. After the deadline, they cannot continue to edit. But as long as they save any changes that they make prior to the submission deadline, all of those changes will be saved in the submission.
Yeah, and I'll preempt another question that often comes along with that question, which is, can I send supplemental material after the deadline? No, you cannot. We will not consider it. Those emails will be deleted. We look at the application package when we are picking the scholars and the finalists. So we understand that, like, you continue to win awards, you get published, all of that, but this helps us keep that playing field a little bit more.
So, okay. I can take this one too. Is there a separate track for computational biology? We do have 20 different categories of entry. As Ali alluded to earlier, a student self-selects those, and all they really do in our system is help determine the expertise of the initial review. So the expertise of the PhD scientists who are going to review that project. And as Ali also said, if there's an issue where they need expertise from an outside category, we have mechanisms in place where they can get that review. So there is a category for computational biology, but there are 19 different other ones. We also understand that many projects are interdisciplinary, but just keep that in mind when selecting categories. Some students get very in their heads about it, understandable, but definitely nothing to stress over.
And we don't award prizes in categories for STS, so it's a little bit less important, except for, like Elaine said, that initial assignment.
All right, I think that is all of our questions in the chat, but I think we did get a few on our question page. Ali, if you're okay with answering some of those. All right, let me see here. Where do students get their research ideas?
Everywhere. This is a great question. A colleague of ours who runs our research teacher conferences, which this is a great opportunity to plug, I should say. We are on the competition side of the society's work. However, we have a third of our organization is dedicated to all of our outreach and equity work, which we focus primarily on teachers. We do this because it's a conflict of interest for us to like fund individual student projects, but we do a lot of training for teachers, materials for teacher classrooms, that sort of thing. So check out on our website. A lot of amazing things that we do on that front. One of those things, we have an annual research teachers conference, one for middle school students or teachers and one for high school teachers. And this conference is done by a lottery system application, which is cool. So what that means is you can apply. You're not guaranteed to get chosen. However, keep applying if you're not. It's totally free. So that's amazing. A free trip to Washington, D.C. And it's very much teacher driven. So it's by lottery, but there are kind of three categories. She will select novice teachers who are new to research entirely, intermediate teachers who have, done this for like a couple of years, whatever, and then expert teachers. So even within those three categories, everybody has lessons to share that might be valuable to one another. And so the sessions are kind of tailored towards like, what does the crowd want to learn? It's an incredible conference. We keep it small on purpose because the cohorts get to know one another. Anyway, so apply to that conference. That this is a topic that comes up every year. And I'll just say our colleague who runs it has this exercise that she used to use in her classroom as a research teacher, as a chemistry teacher, but and it's called I Wonder. And so that's always what comes to mind for me when people ask, like, how do students get their research ideas? Well, there are a lot of ways, but from the very basic level, kind of like what Barbie Frank said in our educator video, you want the students to care about what they're doing. Like, it will drive them to be more interested in the topic, to stick with it, and then just very genuinely want to find the answer. So in an activity like Caitlin's I Wonder activity, you pose to your students like, hey, come up with a list of 25 things that you wonder about. And within that list, there's probably at least 3 or 4 amazing research questions, right? So just being curious about the world around them. So that's one thing you can start with. Another kind of still self-reflective exercise of choosing a project. A lot of projects that we see are inspired by personal circumstances of the student. Sad to say, someone has a relative who has a disease and they wanted to study that disease. So they contacted laboratories, in their area that are focusing on that disease. So we see that story quite often, not to normalize that in any way, but it is definitely a huge inspiration for people. And similarly, if there's an environmental disaster, we'll see a lot of projects in following years about said disaster. So it's more being curious about the world around you and how can you, as a human being, make a difference. And so some of the most interesting ideas I think that we see come from that. At the same time, sometimes a research idea comes from what capabilities and resources you have in your classroom. If you're trying to do research as a class, as a group, we don't accept teamwork for STS. However, a really interesting model we see come from actually many schools is say you invest in one big thing, an oyster farm or you're growing, you have a grow lab in your high school. And so you're going to inspire a lot of your students because you have the materials that you can reuse to do plant research. That's awesome. They can ask a zillion different questions so that the projects are different, but they can support each other in taking care of the plants and that kind of thing. So that's another really good way to approach it. We see that pretty often. Elaine, what else? I feel like we see so many models that we know that they can all be successful. One is not better than the other. And the other thing that I'll say, and then I will let Elaine answer, is that we see, if a student enters a lab because they've been accepted to a program, sometimes students are assigned a question, which is fine and okay too. We ask this question in the application, how did you come up with the idea? And sometimes it's very student driven, and sometimes the question is less student driven, but they developed the full process and there's an adult verifying that. And that's really cool too. We don't want to discredit a student who did have a remarkable opportunity to do research with some really amazing mentors. That's great for them. And I'm sure they still found ways to be creative and independent in that experience.
Yeah, and that was super comprehensive. I don't think I have anything big to add. I would just say, we mentioned our research at home page earlier in the webinar. That is a great place to go to get started. I actually think the I Wonder exercise is on there, so it will walk you through it. Plus things like, we have information about accessing public databases, ways that it can be very easy to pursue those questions, even if you don't have support structures like a classroom or a mentor. So we'll just add that. And let me go ahead and pop that research at home page in our chat. Okay. And then let me see. I think we have time for a couple other questions. I can take this one. During the preparation months, how much does a student spend on his or her research project a day? This totally depends. We at STS accept research from any year of high school. And so it can be conducted over any length of time. So for some students, they start their research the summer before their senior year, and that's the project they submit. Other folks have been working on a project for years, and that is the one they submit. So it really, I'm sorry to not give a more concrete answer, but it really does come down to the specific project. We see students who are successful with projects that have been done over the course of years. We see students be successful with projects that have been done over a matter of weeks. So definitely, again, just more about pursuing your passion and your interests, and a very good research project than necessarily about the timeline. All right, a couple more here. Allie, how can a student compete in research competitions without having any prior experience of research competition? Yeah, without having any prior experience.
Yeah, this happens all the time. I will tell you, I'm sure there are other examples of this, but the one I like to give, the winner last year, a student who won first place in the Science Talent Search, Neil Moudgall, had never done science research, science competition ever. And he entered STS and he won the whole thing. So it can be done. You know, STS is very different from other science competitions. And so I think that in some ways, you know, the application is daunting, whatever, but in some ways that makes it almost easier to entry. There are no local politics to parse through. There's no one to beat out at your high school to even get a spot to come, right? So that automatically makes it easier. It's kind of the more the merrier can apply. And then also because we are coaching you through what information we want, right? There should be really no feeling at the end of our process of like, oh man, I forgot to tell them this, because the questions are so comprehensive. They're like we said, they're designed to make sure you don't forget to tell us, which is why some of them feel repetitive. But that's why we're trying to force you to tell us as much as you can for your own benefit is really what that is for. So I would say don't be afraid, just give it a shot. Like you really have nothing to lose. You know, STS is direct apply, which means anyone can apply from anywhere. Like we talked about, no quotas, anything like that, or cutoffs. And it's unique in that aspect for a lot of science competitions, and it's that way for a reason, because we know that there are great kids coming from areas with a lot of science, and so we want to make sure that they have a fair shot at this particular program. But also, there are a lot of areas of the country that are covered by our science fair network to properly do ISEF, or it's really hard to get to ISEF because you live really far from your local fair or whatever it is. And so it just allows for more opportunity in that way. So if it's your first time entering a science research competition, never fear. I mean, you're also applying to college right now, so it should feel pretty similar to that. But yeah, absolutely, you can be quite successful coming from that circumstance.
Great. Okay, I think we have time to take two more. Next one here, who should give the recommendation letter for a project mentored by a parent? I can go ahead and answer this one. First of all, I just want to say that that's totally normal. We see that very often. One, it's very important to disclose that information in our application. Again, as Ali has said, we have many places where we're going to ask about the support you received, about relationships between you and your mentor. So number one, definitely make sure to be very clear about that. As long as you're clear about it, there's not going to be an issue. And then in terms of the actual recommendation letter, your parent as the mentor, as the person closest to your research, is welcome to write a recommendation letter. Since I don't think we've discussed it in this webinar, I'll just say really quickly that we have 3 types of recommendations for STS. The project recommendation, which should be completed by the adult closest to your science project. The educator recommendation, which should be completed by a science teacher or someone else who knows you in a learning environment. And finally, the high school report, which is just a transcript upload, usually completed by your high school counselor. So for that project recommendation, it's totally fine for your parent to complete it. What we do recommend, however, is that you request a second one. For the educator and project recommendations, you're required to request 1, but may request up to 2. So that is a great opportunity to take advantage of, especially in a case where your parent is your mentor. Even if the person you select is not as familiar with your research project, they should still be someone who can speak to your abilities as a scientist. They're free to say in the recommendation form, and they should, that they're not as familiar with your project. But they're also free to kind of, this is advice we give all the time, free to kind of hack those questions. If it's asking, for instance, is this student someone you would hire in a lab environment based on your work together? You're welcome to say, I didn't work with this student in a lab, but if I did, here's why I would hire them in that situation. So things like that, you're welcome to absolutely use those questions as befits your relationship. So I hope that answers your question, but if it doesn't, this is a very common one we receive, and there's more information about that on those FAQ pages we talked about earlier. All right, Ali, I will give you our last question here, which I think should be a good summary maybe of what we've talked about today. What is some advice you would give to applicants who are exposed to Regeneron STS for the first time?
Oh, very good question. One, don't lose sight of the fact that this is about the whole person. I think that's easy to do. What do we mean by that? So if you have never heard of STS before, I would recommend that you do a couple things. Get yourself hyped up. Please watch our most recent highlights video. You can find that on YouTube. Just Google Regeneron STS Highlights 2024. And you'll hear from students who were in your shoes a year ago today. And you'll hear them say things like, I never thought they would pick me. And then they win $250,000 on a stage later in the video, right? So let that be a confidence boost for you, because you have what it takes inside of you. And sometimes when things are big and overwhelming, like our application process can seem, it's good to have the why. Like, why am I doing this? Like, maybe you look up to those students or you get the advice from them. And that kind of brings you back to like, I want to do this because I want to be like them. I want to be, whatever your internal goal is, that will help remind you. I also would make sure that, especially if you don't have an adult helping you, or an adult giving you advice or guiding you through research or whatever. We have so many resources on our website. It's kind of crazy. I would watch some of our webinars from the past year and a half that kind of go through like tips and tricks we have for the application. We have on our website a tour of the application by section. So if you're like, what the heck do they mean by this question? We probably answer it in that video. So that gives you a sense of like how you should approach certain questions. I would definitely watch that. So it's a long application. We have a lot of resources, but they're going to help you, right? I hope make it a little bit easier. I also would say don't get too in your head about it. Elaine said that earlier. It's easy to do. Sometimes simpler is better. I would go through, if it were me, and I do this all the time for work stuff, you go through and answer some of these questions out loud. You can even, they're free transcription programs. And then, so take your recording, write down the answers that you say, just like top of head answers. And sometimes those are like good enough. And sometimes those are great jumping off points to get where you want to go. So those are kind of some of my initial tips, but good luck. I mean, you can do it, and believe in yourself, and we can't wait to see what you do.
Awesome. Well, I think we are at time. If we didn't get to any questions that you still had, like we said, we're always available. Feel free to give us an email at sts@societyforscience.org. And just thank you all so much for being with us tonight. We hope this was helpful. And a big thank you once again to all of the educators who shared their advice with us this evening. It was definitely amazing and useful for us, and we hope it was the same for you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.